out there, this is Wake Angel 2001, continuing Tech Spike's epic commission. This is another member of the Fearsome Foursome / Destructix, Sergeant Simian. The reason I put up the group shot, because by the time this is done, I will have created every character on the screen except for Scourge. Well, I've created Scourge, but not for Tech Spike, plus many more. This guy, I was not exaggerating when I said he basically wanted me to make a toy line for him. So, since this is a character from the comic book, it's time to get into his backstory. Sergeant Simian started out as Simon from the Gorilla Tribe. They were a pacifistic race, and during the first Robotnik War, Sergeant Simon wanted to fight against him, but the rest of his clan didn't want to get involved in the conflict. Undaunted, he went single-handedly and nearly got himself killed when he was overwhelmed by SWAT bots. But he was rescued by Mammoth Mogul, who gifted him with superior strength. That's what Mammoth Mogul did to everybody on the Fearsome Foursome. He augmented their already natural talents. He returned to his tribe after they had actually finally given in and militarized, but he decided to refuse to join them. They offered him the rank of sergeant, which he accepted, but then he left. He didn't feel that they were worthy of him. So in the time since he's actually served on, he stayed pretty much with the Destructix, even though he served under a whole lot of other people. But there's a little bit of a tragedy in his character. It seems that under certain circumstances, Simon might have been a good guy. I mean, he hated Robotnik. He was willing to sacrifice his life to fight against him, and I don't know, I think it was just because he was twisted by Mammoth Mogul's ideals that he opted not to join his old clan and protect them from Robotnik's reign. The last time Sergeant Simian appeared in the comic book was, of course, in the Dimension Prison Breakout comic storyline, where he decided to join Scourge's little group. And that was never followed up on because, time to give your obligatory one-finger salute to Ken Penders. That's enough about Sergeant Simian's backstory. Let's talk about the toy. We're making a toy here. So what's a good base figure? It turned out that the Slugterra Cord figure was just about perfect. He's let's see, what's the best way to describe Cord? He has a really muscular upper body, which is slightly hunched, a huge barrel chest with gigantic arms, but he also has small and skinny legs. He basically has a pretty good gorilla physique. And it's surprising how hard it is to find this in action figure lines, despite how common a physique this is in cartoons, especially stylized superhero cartoons. Before I go any further, a lot of times people ask me what kinds of materials I use. Well, this is the kind of paint I use for brown. It's Anita's all-purpose acrylic craft paint, chocolate brown. I hate this paint. This paint is horrible. It's the only shade that I've been able to find which is good for making brown fur, like for certain characters like Princess Sally, and in this case, Sergeant Simian. But it is the worst paint that I have ever used. I mean, it's not this brand, because I've used other paints from this brand, and they work fantastically. But, well, it's hard to describe, but let's take a look at what a single layer looks like. Yeah, you see the arm there, the shoulder? That's what one layer of this paint looks like. The rest of him, which looks much more uniformly brown, that's 5 layers. Yeah, it took me days to paint this thing. I mean, what should have been banged out in maybe an hour or two, it took me literally days, because I had to apply a coat that looked like that left shoulder, wait for it to dry, and then put on another coat, which would still look like that, wait for that to dry, because if you try to paint again without waiting for the first layer to dry, then you're going to end up with streaks. It's going to look patchy and streaky, so you got to wait for it to completely dry before you can put on another layer. I hate this brown paint. I haven't found a replacement paint that's in this shade, but I hate this paint. It's the worst paint I've ever used. If anybody knows where I can get this shade of chocolate brown in a paint that actually covers in one layer, I would jump right on it. So yeah, that's your assignment, folks. If anybody knows what kind of paint I can use, let me know. But I got a little bit ahead of myself. We're not up to the painting part yet. First, I had to mod the torso to be more like, Sergeant Simian, who only wore a shirt one time, and that was not the appearance that Tekka Spike wanted. So the first thing I had to do was sand away the shirt and, all the clothing details, like those buckles on his forearms. Not exactly the most elegant solution, because, as you can see, this is that kind of plastic that the figure inside is hollow and this is hard. And then I had to sculpt musculature on top of it. Not really very experienced in sculpting musculature, and I don't really have much to work with. Like, in terms of, if I could reference another figure I have, because here's a funny thing. I think I might have an old He-Man or He-Man knockoff figure buried, forgotten somewhere in my closet, but I don't really own any muscular dude action figures. I think the closest one I have is that Total Heroes Flash. So, yeah, that's my best guess at how to sculpt a big set of pectorals and abs. And you see here in this picture he has some little fur points on his shoulders. I would later remove those because upon looking at his reference again, Sergeant Simian doesn't really have such shaggy fur, and besides, they just look like, they just look like horns anyway. I did keep him on his forearms though, because he does have somewhat shaggy forearms. I also had to sculpt on a fifth finger, because, Slug Terror guys have only 4 fingers, but the Sonic characters have 5. So, yeah, there's a pinky. Next was to sculpt on the belt buckle and his bandolier, which is the only article of clothing he actually does wear besides his pants. Okay, so some purists may notice that Sergeant Simian is depicted with the bandolier going over his right shoulder, but here I made it go over his left shoulder. The reason I did this is because Cord already had like a belt thing going around his body, and this way I could work with the sculpt that was already on his back for the strap, rather than having to sand it away, cover it with sculpting material, try to smooth it out, only to have to put another band on going in the opposite direction. I figured, why not just make the bandolier go over his left shoulder? It's not that big a deal, right? So, hopefully Tekka Spike understands that the bandolier is going the other way. Okay, so let's get to the head, which is usually the most important part for these dudes. The only thing I did pre-sculpting was cut off the little horn that comes out of his helmet, and then on to sculpting on new material. Parts breakdown, he has bigger ears, cheek tufts of fur, that thing is like his big underbite, because he has this big lower lip that's always kind of frowning, flat ape nose, very prominent brow, and some bigger eyes, along with his iconic little pit helmet. All those details sculpted in. It doesn't really look too elegant before it's painted, because, you see the blue under there, and the white just kind of makes it look like clown makeup. That's a similar problem to what happened with Flying Frog, but, once it's all painted up, it actually looks very much like an angry gorilla's face. Yeah. Maybe I made the cheek tufts a little too big, because he doesn't really have that big a cheek tufts, but, Cord's head is actually pretty small, and it gets really hard to make the points the right shape when they get smaller than this, because any tinier than this, and they're actually so small that they get stuck in the wrinkles of my fingerprints, and then I can't really work with them. So the cheek tufts are a little bit bigger, but other than making his entire head bigger, which would mean losing that cool chiseled jaw look that this character already had, and possibly not making it work on the ball joint, so again, I tend to prefer a minor compromise in design to completely compromising the functionality of the toy. I wanted this guy to still have his ball-jointed head. All I did for the legs was to paint them to look like army camouflage pants, so I won't bore you with that detail. And let's just take a look at the completed Sergeant Simian figure. No more Simon the Angry Ape Man, this is a full-on Sergeant. See, he has an armband with the 3 stripes to prove it. He is a big, burly, imposing figure, and he looks pretty cool. I'll show, when I finish Lightning Links, I'll show a comparison of the Fearsome Foursome standing next to Mammoth Mogul so you can get an idea of their respective scales. And then that will be the end of the beginning. Yes, I have barely scratched the surface of what Tekkaspike wanted me to make for him. Remember, we're going full-on toy line here. um, yeah, but don't worry, I'm still making figures for other people too. Tekkaspike doesn't have all my attention for now. So yeah, stay tuned for more stuff from Wake Angel 2001. But for now, I'm signing off.